Good evening, everybody. This is Elliot Miles McKinley. I am your host tonight for composers at home, maybe drinking coffee. I'm going to fade out our little background track. That was Herbie Hancock from the Mr. Hands record, Spiraling Prism. And I will go ahead and port myself in here. And there I am. And there is our social media. So if you are a fan of the show, please give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of that kind of stuff. We greatly appreciate it. We being me, since I am the sole proprietor here of this little endeavor. So anything you can do, and by the way, just in case, I like to play around with these little transitions so that down below there's my name in case I forget what my name is. It's September already. It's hard to believe. It's September 3rd, and it's been an interesting summer. I hope everybody's had a good summer so far. You know, we've had some interesting weather, hot and all that kind of stuff. I know that, of course, COVID makes things a little strange for everybody, but I hope everybody's doing okay. So this is season 2. It's kind of hard to believe that it's already season 2 of this show. I have a whole slate of guests set to appear on the show. And tonight, I'm super happy to have my friend and excellent composer Michael Roth joining us. I'll bring Michael in just a little bit. I'm actually going to give a little teaser of one of his big projects in just a few minutes before I bring him in. But on the Facebook page and also on the YouTube page, there are links to season 1. So if you would like to catch up with any of the interviews I did for the composers in season 1, feel free to check out the shows. They're all on demand. It turns out I did a little math, and I did about 23 hours worth of content in terms of interviews and music. So I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. So here we are. It's a little warm. I apologize for the ambient noise. There's a fan running just to kind of keep things cool with the light and everything like this. It's actually not super warm. It's just really humid here in Boston right now. So, all right. So Michael Roth, I'm just going to play a little excerpt, a teaser intro to his web opera, and we're going to talk about the web opera in more detail and play a scene from his web opera coming up. So I'm going to play that for you first before I bring Michael in, as I normally would bring a guest in now. Oh, another thing. Since this is a live show, if you're watching live, please say hello. Ask questions anytime. I will look over here. Those of you who are fans of the show know that I always look over to this side to see about comments that will come in. So David Gaines did say hello. So David, nice to see you, man. So yeah, say hello, and at any time, give us a comment, a question, anything like this as we go. So let me cue up the intro to the web opera, and I am just going to find it here on my little list of things. Whoop. I see. Whoop. 1 second here. Oh, I had it queued up and I closed the window inadvertently, which is really fascinating. So I was gonna, you know, this is a live show and I don't have a producer. I don't have my Roz Doyle available for me to do these things. So I'm gonna open it up right now. So you get to see me open up a folder. Actually, you don't get to see me open the folder. I'm seeing myself open up a folder where I have the thing I want to play for you. So season 2, Michael, and here we go, the trailer for the web. I've got it right here. It is ready to go. Okay, super. So I'm going to switch views now, and let's watch this trailer. And I'll meet you up in just a minute or so. And with that, I'm going to bring in our guest, Michael Roth. Michael, how are you doing? And sorry for the technical glitch, but it's a live show, and like I said, I don't have a producer. I am the sole person here in charge of all things. So, apologize.
It's totally cool.
Yeah, we talked about this about literally 5 minutes before we went on, and Michael had a great idea. I said, "Oh, you should play the trailer to the web opera," and I thought, "Oh, that's a really great idea. I have it queued up." Well, I didn't. I have the scene queued up, but I didn't have the other one. So anyway, all right, it is what it is. So Michael's joining us from California, and it's we were just talking about the weather out there. And you said it's about to get hot.
Well, I mean, so I'm in Los Angeles. I'm actually in Santa Monica. Happily, I'm about 25 blocks from the ocean, so there is a good breeze here. But apparently, it's supposed to be getting hot here in LA starting tomorrow. That's what. But I'm all right.
Good, man. So first of all, thanks for being on the show.
I'm really flattered that you asked me, Elliot.
Oh,
I'm really thrilled to be here. So.
It's my pleasure. So, I sometimes, in a preamble, before we get into sort of like the who's and what's and the whys of you, mention sort of the relationship that I have with my guests, and most of my guests to this point have been friends and people that I've known in some cases for many, many years. In your case, we're relatively new friends. We met actually in
fact, we've never met.
We never met. It's funny that we live in this day where it seems like we did meet, but because we talked enough. We've talked quite a bit, both in various privately and also in sort of group situations. But this is I don't want to say this is a COVID friendship, but it certainly is something that got inspired. I guess our meeting, let's put it this way. COVID's horrible, awful. It's been a real drag, for a lack of anything better to say, for the world since it came roaring onto us. But there have been a few silver linings to this, and one of them is I had the opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people that I would not have otherwise, I think, met.
I think you're not alone in that. I know I'm part of an organization called the Theatrical Sound Designers and Composers Association, and I've become very good friends in the past 6-7 months with a bunch of composers and sound designers who, in fact, I've never met. Mm-hmm. And it's unique to our times, and it's that sort of Zoom intimacy has happened, between a lot of artists I know mm-hmm. and things like that, because this is our way of continuing,
right.
and it sort of begs the question of what will happen to Zoom when life returns to something vaguely resembling what
Right.
it was before, and nobody
Right.
knows that, and nobody knows what the timeline is. But it's
Right.
interesting because yes, you and I have become pretty friendly. Will we, in fact, ever be? Will I ever be in Rhode Island or Boston? I don't know.
I hope so.
Maybe. Hope.
I hope so. I hope to also make it out, to California.
Yeah.
It's a, life is kind of changed in that regard, that it's not so easy
Right.
to make that happen. I think if under normal circumstances, probably you and I might scheme something to find a project to do or something like this, right? But anyway, so we met actually as a result of some. Initially, I did some of these composer hangouts back in April. I just thought, why not open up my Zoom to the community, and that's how I met a bunch of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And you happened onto one of those, and you came to several of them. Yeah, you took the bait, right? Exactly. Yeah, and you've never left. So
yeah, you get used to that. That's part of my personality.
Yeah, right. The guest that shows up and never leaves.
Yeah, it's kind of me.
But in all seriousness, we started discovering that we actually do have some common, a lot of common friends, a lot of common interests, and so on and so forth. Not the least of which, of course, we're both Wolverines from different time periods, but we're both Wolverines, and we'll maybe talk about that when you talk about your trajectory through your education. But yeah, so anyway, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you in this fairly short amount of time, and to get to know some of your music. So I hope that the folks who are watching us now, those of you who don't know Michael's music, hopefully after this next hour and a half or so, will rush out and devour as much as you can of all the types of things that he does. And so let's find out a little bit more about you. And I know some things about you, obviously, but maybe the folks at home don't know some things about you. So we'll start with some basic biography stuff. The first is, so from where do you hail? Where was your hatching spot?
I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up on Long Island. To give you a time frame, I went to high school with Howard Stern.
Oh, wow.
So there you go.
I think that's a new piece of information for me.
Yeah, I know it. I hold that one out for
for the select.
But
yeah, right.
But anyway, and just how music happened. We've sort of talked about this, and it's interesting. I don't know what I did prior to around age 10 or 11, other than be probably fairly obnoxious.
As most 11-year-olds are.
Yeah, but sometime around 10 or 11, so there was a piano in my house. My parents were not musical. My sister studied piano a little bit, and there was a piano there. And then sometime around 10, 11, 12-ish, there was a radio in the living room near the piano, and I started playing along with rock and roll stuff, because that's really the first thing I listened to. And so yes, I did watch the Beatles on Sullivan and things like that. That was a big part of my life. But I really didn't know what that meant to me until I started hearing stuff and realizing that the notes in the piano seemed to match that.
Yeah.
And then my parents asked me if I wanted to take lessons, and I did. And I started studying piano around 12-ish. And then by the time I was 13 or 14, I'd formed a rock and roll band and had a Farfisa organ.
Oh, man, now
I know.
That's something, I know.
I mean, where's that Farfisa organ now? Now it's just
Where is it?
It's a sound in contact. It's a soft synth.
Yeah, I think I have a patch in Reason somewhere.
You know what I mean? But it's not the real thing. You know? But anyway, and then I was in bands through junior high and high school, and that was sort of what I did, I started writing songs, I don't know, 15, 16, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
more to say about all that.
Sure.
But
Yeah. So, I usually ask most of the composers that come on to the show. I'll ask at some point, kind of like, you've encapsulated it a little bit in your short bio. There is how you began encountering music. So you've already said that much. But was there any point? At what point, if there was a point, did you think that, hey, maybe I can do this?
well, the way I look at it now, and is so I was a pretty big Beatles fan, but I was also a top 40 fan and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do remember when I was around 13, 14-ish,
Mm-hmm.
I had Sergeant Pepper. And I also have been listening to Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. So I know this
Mm-hmm.
clearly dates me some. But anyway, I all I know that is true is that I listened to Sergeant Pepper in one evening 5 or 6 or 7 times,
Yeah.
and I only could recognize there was something going on in it that was beyond my reach. It was beyond me. It was beyond me lyrically. Like, now I can talk about it with some, coherence, I
Right.
imagine. But
Right.
and Strawberry Fields and A Day in the Life mean something to me.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, Fixing a Hole and Benefit from Mr. Kite, and how those lyrics come together and what they did with the orchestra. I
Mm-hmm.
can teach a course in that.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
do know it pretty cold.
Yeah.
But I guess that I recognized that there was something to this musical vocabulary that was beyond me. And it's one of those moments where you say, well, do I start investigating this and
Mm-hmm.
figuring this out
Mm-hmm.
and realizing it's going to take a lifetime to figure
Yeah.
out? Or, do I just play in a rock and roll band? And so that was really the moment. I did go to young people's concerts.
Mm-hmm.
So I did see Bernstein conduct the New York Phil. I have some memories of it, but I studied classical piano a little bit, but I was not a good student. In fact, I studied piano when I graduated from Michigan. I started studying with the same teacher again, and I was a much better student than I'd been in junior high and high school. Because
Mm-hmm.
really all I did was play in a rock and roll band. So I
Yeah.
could play Light My Fire.
Yeah.
That was what I could really
Right.
do.
Right.
But the idea of being a composer, so I started writing
That's
songs.
kind of the next thing I would say was like,
Yeah.
when did you start thinking that, hey, you could
Right.
write a tune, for example?
The way I sort of put it, I've sort of said this to you once. I think the trajectory of my composition career is probably the opposite of what anybody should ever do, because I was really writing pop songs, and that
Mm-hmm.
seemed pretty good, and that
Mm-hmm.
was about the top shelf for me. I couldn't get above that, right? But then the way I look at it, Elliot, is that when the Beatles broke up, right around that time, I was invited on a class trip from my high school
Mm-hmm.
by a class that I wasn't in. They had an extra ticket,
Mm-hmm.
and I had friends in the class, and they invited me to go see a production of this play called Waiting for Godot
Uh-huh.
by Beckett. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about it. I wasn't a big theater goer. I went to the Fillmore East all the time. I saw Eric Clapton at the Fillmore. I saw Crosby, Stills, and
Yeah.
Nash at the Fillmore.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I knew.
Yeah.
They were all talking about this crazy play, but I knew nothing about it. And then I sat there for 2 hours and
Mm.
watched a play about two guys waiting for somebody to show up, and in the meantime they just tell each other stories and jokes. And I always thought that life was really, really strange, but I really didn't know until that night
Mm.
that art could express it. I really didn't. I mean, I had a hint of it from the Beatles, but that really put it right there.
Right.
When a manservant shows up and says, "Mankind, in spite of the tennis, wastes and pines," that was a great graduation for me from nothing is real and nothing to get hung about. So, um, the way I would say that I've started becoming a composer was then when I went to Michigan, and again I'd written some little piano things, I'd written some things out, I'd studied a little bit of music theory, but not enough to compared to other people at 16. I had nothing going on. And then I acted a little bit at Michigan, but then I started writing music for plays there, and that's what led me to studying with William Bolton,
Right.
our teacher.
Right.
Just to kind of really summarize this quickly, so that's what I did, and then when I moved back to New York, I pretty much started making my living doing that. But at the same time, rather than go to graduate school, because when I was 18, I didn't even know that graduate school really existed.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know.
Right.
You have a doctorate in composition. What the hell is that?
I don't know.
I didn't know what that
Just
was.
for the folks at home, if you're sick, don't call us.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I can't help you either. But anyway, I started rather seriously going to a lot of contemporary music concerts, and so like I can talk about Elliot Carter string quartets, but I didn't study them in an academic place at all.
Yeah.
I can talk about Mahler symphonies because I went to them.
Yeah.
But I didn't study them until I was in my 20s when I started saying, so what do these composers do?
Yeah.
And now that I'm 135, that
minus
buildup of all that.
You do some math there. 135 minus whatever times the coefficient of blah blah blah.
Yeah. I hope that answers.
Yeah, no,
it
does. It does. You're
I've gone from innocent to pretentious over a lifetime, and
well, no, what's interesting is like, well, so you dropped Elliot Carter in there, and so like I'm thinking like, coming from a background that you came from, which is not an uncommon background for many of us. You entering music through the door of pop music or jazz or whatever it might be, is not an uncommon point of entry. But it's the point of entry into. I mean, you mentioned Beckett as a way of framing perhaps a dimension of how art can express things that are more than just entertainment.
Right.
And how, well, I would say, like, for example, the Beatles are certainly entertaining, but much of their later work is on a, it's like there's the entertainment aspect, but you go one step further and you get into the art aspect of it. I mean, maybe not their, their the 1964 Mop Top, fun songs, but like Sgt. Pepper, for example. But the thing of it is that the like Elliot Carter, like what drew you into that kind of world? Like besides, when like what got you to go to concerts of music that at least on the surface is, if not 90 degrees, is 180 degrees away from something like the Doors? Well,
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I mean, I because you heard me say this, that I heard Elliot Carter say in an interview that his music was that his music had like piano phrasings that was like Fats Waller. And
that sounds like him saying it too. I can almost hear him saying that. Yeah.
And I say, now that's really cool. And then I've described my own music as being somewhere between Elliot Carter and Fats Domino. Because I hear both things at once. I met Carter once
Mm-hmm.
in passing. I certainly had good friends of his of mine who studied with him. And boy, he was composing till 104.
Yeah,
I
he was
mean,
practically up until the day he died.
and his late percussion music is as rock and roll as anything you want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'll talk specifically about Carter. As for how I got into the chamber music scene, I just had a lot of friends, and I just went to a lot of concerts, and a lot of these folks are still friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was kind of a pretty good ragtime pianist, which is a Bolcom thing,
Yeah.
people started asking me to write rags, like chamber music rags, and my earliest chamber music were rags. But what I would do was I would say, well, Elliot Carter, I didn't understand this until I saw his string quartets live, and I saw the first three somewhere around when he was like 75, 80. It's just like an insane thing about
Right.
him. He was,
Right.
he was
Carter's
75. He had another 2 or 3 string quartets to go, but
Right.
that's okay.
Right.
Anyway, but what's clear in the second and third quartet is that the relationship is theatrical.
Oh, absolutely.
He's clearly influenced by Beckett in many ways, but also in the second string quartet, it's, two instruments against two instruments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the third, they're kind of all in their own world. And that wasn't really vivid to me until I watched them.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, then there's things like the Symphony for Three Orchestra,
Right.
where he's playing with space and time in a very overtly theatrical way.
Right.
And
Right.
that really appealed to me, probably to the theater guy in me. So I started. So these early rag pieces were really pieces where people would assume that I would write a nice tune, and I would. But then in one of the moments in the one of the sections of each rag, there'd be a moment where suddenly all 5 instruments are playing different things,
Yeah, right.
and they're not playing,
Right.
even though they really are.
Yeah.
And it was always interesting to watch the players kind of maneuver around that.
Yeah.
And that was my dipping my foot into the water of getting more and more complicated. At the same time, because I know we want to talk about this, that I was also composing a lot of music and music directing some musicals and composing music for theater. That was my job. I mean, I was getting gigs. So.
Yeah. Right. And there's no better gateway into a profession or a career than gigging. Right. One gig becomes another. Right. That's it's sort of like, how did I become this? Well, somebody asked me to do it. I got paid.
And happily, I was in good circumstances with composing, and people did essentially want me to write music within my own style. I mean, they didn't. I was not asked very often to be somebody else.
Right, because we all hear stories, and we're jumping around, but that's totally fine. I think it's as part of a conversation is I've got 4 or 5 things I want to ask you about that you touched on, but I'll hit the last one, which is and then I want to look and see if we've got some comments coming in or questions. But is it unusual is it unusual for someone working in film, TV, and theater as a composer or sound designer, sound artist, to have a lot of free reign? Because the maybe it's a popular misconception that producers of shows and movies and whatever come in with fairly preconceived ideas of what they want, and then they sort of say, well, I want something that sounds like John Williams or something, and then so you're kind of like, you either do that or you lose the gig. And so, I mean, I'm curious about is your experience more normative, or is it just that you got lucky with the people you work with?
I think it's a combination of things, Elliot. I think that when I was in my 20s, um, the idea of writing music that's like something
Yeah.
was okay.
Hmm.
And but this is going to be a real Michigan couple of sentences. There was I
Hail
of
to
my
the
music.
victors.
Yeah, one of my music theory teachers was a fellow named Paul Boylan. Was
Yeah.
he around time? Okay.
Well, no, but we
Yeah.
retired by
Right.
then. But of course, very famous.
Right. And
Uh,
he was very very nice to me. God knows why, but he was very nice to me. But one of the things that he said to me, because he heard some of my music, as did Bolcom too. But I remember Boylan said to me, you're a very, very clever guy. You really got to watch that your cleverness doesn't take over. And I
funny.
went, wow. And that's a hell of a thing to hear when you're 19, 20,
Right.
because part of composing in other styles is that you can show how clever you are.
Right.
And I think that's a trap.
Right.
And I think if it takes over your life, it gets really weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, although I probably wasn't conscious of it, when I first started writing chamber music, not knowing if anybody's going to play it, and I still don't know if anybody's going to play it, it was my way of saying, finally, what does my music really sound like? And what are my explorations into what music is as a language?
Mm.
And that is going to be over here at the same time that I'm going to do all these gigs and do what I have to do
Right.
to keep going. But
Right.
then also, hopefully, and this is I think answering the question, develop relationship with colleagues and collaborators where they say, yeah, just write what you're going to write. I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And every so often pay homage to where the time period of a production or whatever,
something
but
of that nature. Yeah.
but because I know we're going to talk about Shakespeare a bit. What this is a Shakespearean notion that I must say has had a big influence on me. Shakespeare, the only etching that we have of a original Shakespeare production is from Titus Andronicus. I'm pretty sure. Somebody can correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's that. And you can see that their costumes, there are people dressed in ancient Roman garb, but the guards in the scene are dressed as beefeaters from Shakespeare's time.
Yeah.
So he's postmodern.
And yeah.
And when you're working, to my mind, certainly on Shakespeare, but almost on any play, you're dealing with 2 to 3 things. You're dealing with, in Shakespeare, the time that the play actually takes place in the histories. That's a generation or two before Shakespeare. You're dealing with Shakespeare's time, and then you're dealing with our time.
Right.
And so I've come to the point where I think it's disingenuous for me to write music in a certain style when other composers who actually live there are at the top of their game writing that music.
Sure, it's why?
But I was,
yeah.
So, but that's not. So the answer to your question is it's complicated. If you have good relationships with good directors and collaborators, you can get a bit of free rein about where you're going to go, and they want that. But it sort of depends.
Yeah.
So the answer is, Elliot, it depends.
It depends. Good answer. I'll take that. I was interested in I do want to go to the audience because there are a few comments and maybe questions that might have popped in. But when you were talking about Shakespeare and the sort of the postmodern kind of veneer, if you will, of how you're kind of in different times at the same time. I'm sort of also reminded of how Elliot Carter's music also puts you in that same psychological framework where you're in multiple time spaces, multiple psychological time spaces. But also,
boy, that's true.
But also, and boy, there's a direct lineage, if there ever was one, to Charles Ives. And how Ives is all about memory, and it's all about, how Ives is imagining other spaces in a current time space. And
Right.
so, and of course, it's interesting, of course, that Carter, had
Right,
intersection
and
with
there's
Ives.
the sort of famous story about Carter to write his first string quartet. Basically, had to kind of he like went to the desert in
Yeah, he went
Arizona and
to,
just
was it
or something like
Phoenix or
that,
Santa Fe? I
and
forget.
he had to clear the slate and write, and things like that have had a profound influence on my thinking about and it is interesting, Elliot, because you and I have had different career trajectories because I've I hang around with a lot of composers who write music for things, and
Yeah.
then I come to your meetings where it's a lot of composers who just write music, and
Yeah.
it's a very schizophrenic thing because I live in both
Yeah.
worlds, but I try to be really honest as I can be, and I probably fail a bit, but
There's no failure.
yeah,
It's
that's
just
no,
being,
that's
one can never fail at being honest. And
that
that's what I've learned in my few
our,
orbits around the sun.
the current political scene notwithstanding.
Oh,
But
of
I,
course, but then again,
but I digress. So, yeah.
I think, like we said before the show, being
Yeah.
dishonest in politics is not a new thing.
Yeah, right.
So,
And that's Shakespearean.
and that's Shakespearean, right? So going to the audience, so we have some comments. So
Okay.
so Adam Green, hi Adam, if you're still watching, says nice to see you, Elliot, Michael. He did mention I bumped your audio up just a bit, so hopefully, Adam, if the audio is still a little low, will you let me know? But I'm getting the little red knot. I'm getting close to the red. I don't want to go over the red on you. Yeah, maybe not. Who knows? We've got Evan West from our group says hello, and Jonathan Newmark says hello to both of us, and Natalie Margaret. I don't want to say your name incorrectly. Hula? Do you know?
It's Nat, and she's a very, very fine young sound designer
Awesome.
who's come to the salons that I've been leading.
Awesome.
So
Well, hello.
I'm glad you're here, Nat. That's fantastic.
Christopher, is it Moy? Maybe.
Mui,
Mui.
who's also a Michigan.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to do that, honestly,
Yeah,
because
don't
I don't want to do that for the Ohio State people.
Yeah.
So ask you a question. How did you decide to do Wonderful Town for Soft Show?
Soft show. Oh my
Soft
God.
Show. Soft Show.
That Chris was in it. How did I decide? I was 19 and I didn't know anything, and no, I music directed and conducted Bernstein's Wonderful Town when I was 19 at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Did I do a good job? I have no idea, but I remember I just kept saying I'd love to do a Bernstein show when I got the gig of being a music director, because I should do some Bernstein, right? There you go.
Sure.
And so how did I decide? It wasn't really my decision, although I certainly pushed it. And I think we picked Wonderful Town because it was easier than On the Town, which is a big ballet dance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Chris was in it. I can picture him 20 feet from me up there, Chris. So nice to hear from you, man. That's very sweet.
So yeah, well, anybody watching, feel free to say hello. Feel free to ask us any questions. We're gonna play some music, I promise. We played a little teaser of the web opera, and I know we're getting there. Oh, Chris says that he has a copy of the review.
Well,
so there you go.
Okay, well, he's one ahead of me.
You got a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I guess, right? Roger Ebert.
I'm hoping I've improved my game just a little bit since 19, but
Nice.
maybe not. So I don't know.
Nice. Andrew D'Angelo is a wonderful composer and saxophonist, says hello. Normally he's on Facebook, but he's on YouTube tonight, so that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
We're all over the world. It's exactly 2 platforms. So anyway, so here you are. Uh, how did you? So you went to Michigan, and after Michigan, did you go back to New York? We didn't really
Yes,
sort of put. Yeah.
right. So I lived in New York and was working in New York through my 20s until
Mm-hmm.
around 1980, 82 or so. And one of the most important collaborators at that time one was a fellow named Dan Schreier, who was we actually had been roommates for a while. Now he's a very prominent sound designer and composer in New York. And we actually wrote a very crazy opera together.
Uh,
But the other important meeting was I started working a lot with a director named Des McAnuff. I conducted actually his musical. And then the other thing that happened around then was I had my initial contacts with Randy Newman. But just to kind of put the whole picture together,
mm-hmm.
I Des became artistic director of La Jolla Playhouse in 1983. So I was among the inaugural artists who came out and started the rebirth of La Jolla Playhouse. And I was resident composer
Mm,
at La Jolla
mm.
from like 1983 to mid 90s, close to 2000, depending on how you look at it.
Okay.
So, and then pretty much since then, I've been West Coast based.
Okay.
And I started working at all the theaters around here with a gig or two in New York almost every year,
Yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on stuff.
On things going on, right?
And then the other thing to mention, because we'll be getting to it, is that Des, who among other things, so he was artistic director in La Jolla. He also directed Jersey Boys and
Mm,
various other things. Then
mm-hmm.
Des became artistic director at the Stratford Festival in Canada,
Yeah.
and so that is in many ways uh, some of the most important work I've done as a theater composer
Mm-hmm.
was 5 seasons at the Stratford Festival.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Which is a top
Right.
festival, right?
It's the largest theater in North America
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, and it's also the only place that I've worked where I was paid for every job that I did. Which for the theater artists out there who might be listening, it's in America. Oh yeah, he's a pianist and a composer and a sound designer, and I hear he can, bake muffins. Let's
Sure.
hire him.
Yeah. Let's hire
And
him. We,
and we'll give him $1,000, and he'll do all of those things.
right.
And theater artists who do these things are trying very hard to fight against
That.
that because they are different skills.
Sure.
At Stratford, I was paid for
Paid
everything.
for everything. Yeah. I don't want to go down the road of like
Yeah.
union stuff, but I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds like a union violation to me. If it's sort of like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy can open a door and write
Yeah.
the music for the show and also
It's
make coffee. It's like
yeah.
those are three union gigs.
Yeah, I know.
Remember?
It is a big road to travel down, but it is part of what made the work at Stratford so special.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you? Well, you mentioned that. Well, I wanted to ask a question actually about like the differences that you see between, say, New York and the West Coast, like L.A. I mean, of course, besides the obvious geographical differences and the demographic differences, what about the working scene in both places? I mean, I assume you like LA because you've been there for a while. Is there something about the environment there besides the opportunities that you might also have in film that you might not
Yeah.
have in New York that that you can speak to?
I can't give that too brilliant an answer to that because I'm lucky that I've worked in a lot of places.
Hmm.
I think that were I to have stayed in New York longer than I did,
Mm-hmm.
because I was also working as a music director in theater, probably I would have done more music direction for musicals.
Got it. Yeah.
Because I was pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I'm more suited to be a composer, and I'm lucky that when I did move out here, that it was at a time when more and more people were asking for music to be in theater productions and plays and things like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
was sort of there to start filling in gaps of how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s into the 90s and early part of the century.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no question that some of the finest musicians in the world are here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You could argue that the best orchestra in the world is the First
Maybe.
Chairs, who play
Yeah.
for a film scoring set. They
Right.
are certainly the best sight readers ever,
Right.
and and they play the hell out of things really well. And the way I would put it actually is that if you're a lucky musician in LA when life is relatively normal,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a player, you play different music uh, every day. Uh, the
Mm-hmm.
working musician in New York, more often than not, if they're playing the show, is playing the same music every day. Now
Right.
that's oversimplifying,
Sure.
and I don't mean to make too much of that. Other than I think that there are advantages to the Los Angeles life that also lead to a really active chamber music scene. I mean,
Yeah.
I am good friends with a lot of people who play chamber music and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
chamber composers who I've become very close to
Right.
in this world, who all see LA as a big experimental canvas to
Mm.
play in. Now, New
Mm-hmm.
York's that too. It's just
Right.
different.
It's a different vibe.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, how you talk about the musicians in, let's say, a studio orchestra, who basically have a new thing put in front of them every day,
5 minutes.
every 5 minutes, every hour, whatever
Yeah.
it might be, and it's a kind of a throwback to the radio orchestras. Who used to do that kind of work regularly. There were radio orchestras, CBS Radio Orchestra,
Right.
NBC Radio
Right,
Orchestra, whatever. So for the folks at home who are of a generation that don't quite remember that how big radio was, and that every radio network, practically every radio station, even in small towns, actually had musicians that they hired to play live music.
Right.
And
right.
these were musicians that just, they had composers and arrangers just
Right.
constantly working. There was a lot of work for you went back about 80, 90 years. If you were a composer and arranger and you knew half the, you knew how to do something, you probably
Right.
could get work.
Right. And because I know we'll be moving to something from Stratford in a second, hopefully, the life of a musician in Stratford, Canada,
Mm-hmm.
is actually akin to that, in the sense that if you're lucky enough to sort of get into the playing community of Stratford,
Mm-hmm.
you play the musicals, which are there is fine.
Mm-hmm.
You also have a reasonably active jazz or chamber life, reasonably, but then you also are playing the music for the shows, and
Yeah.
you're paid rather well.
Yeah.
So, because I know we'll be playing something from The Tempest, that there's no synthesizers there. I mean, that's
It's
a real string
all
orchestra,
real stuff, right?
and they're really, really excellent players, and it's a great scene, and they really want to do a good job for you, just like musicians do
Right.
everywhere. They want to be part
Right.
of the gig, and they're paid better than I can pay people here, frankly. So,
Well, different.
Yeah.
Again, those are other. That's
Yeah.
a topic for another show.
Yeah,
is
I know,
The whole,
right.
the whole thing. So, Julie Haber says hello.
Hello, Julie Haber. Julie's a fantastic stage manager who's, yes, I've worked with her for a long time. I won't say how many years. Hi, Julie.
She's enjoying the conversation.
Okay, good. She was in La Jolla back in the day, and in Orange County, and There you go. So,
Julie, I don't have the is it Hyman's song from the LJP?
oh
As You
yeah,
Like
okay.
It.
No,
I
that,
don't
we're
have
not
that
gonna,
queued up, but I,
but something just as good.
yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff. Let's get to some music.
Yeah, let's get to some
Since you mentioned Stratford, since we're kind of talking about that, maybe we'll do the scene
Yes.
that you sent me. Do you want to set this up for the folks at home at
Sure.
all?
So we did a production of The Tempest with Christopher Plummer as Prospero. Not bad to be in his company for a little while. I've done 2 collaborations with him. One was The Tempest, where him as Prospero, and then the other, I composed the music for his one-person show, where we really collaborated, which is a whole interesting thing. And what I'll say about what the scene you're about to see is that the Tempest basically involves a Duke Prospero who's been exiled and usurped out of his kingdom, and he is exiled on an island. And while there, he has various slave figures who work for him, and the principal one, you can say a slave or fairy, depending on what you want to say, named Ariel, who basically does what he commands. And he promises to set Ariel, in this production played by a woman, free. I'm oversimplifying, so forgive me,
Sure.
scholars out there. In any case, the Tempest, he creates a storm to bring his political enemies to the island. And he has rounded all of them up, and they are all under a spell. And just prior to this scene, he says to Ariel, essentially, now that I have them, can I seek revenge? What should I do? And she essentially says, well, I would forgive them were I human. Which makes him think about things, because at a certain point, if you're going to be as arrogant as those who have hurt you, are you just being just like them? And so he brings them into a circle, and so you'll see him with the help of some music that he calls for, bring them in, and then you'll see my setting of Ariel sings "Where the bee sucks, there suck I," and it is about her that she will be free.
Right. Okay, great. Well, let's roll this, and I'm gonna switch over to the scene, and we're gonna play it, and we'll meet you back in just a few minutes.
But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine ends upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound. I'll drown my book. A solemn air and the best comforter to an unsettled fancy. Cure thy brains, now useless, which boil within thy skull. The charm dissolves apace, and as the morning steals upon the night, melting the darkness, so their rising senses begin to chase the ignorant fumes that mantle their clearer reason. Their understanding begins to swell, and the approaching tide will shortly fill the reasonable shore that now lies foul and muddy. There stand for you are spell-stopped. Not one of them that yet looks on me, or doth know me. Ariel, fetch the robe of office from my cell. Quickly, spirit, thou shalt ere long be free.
Where the bee sucks, there suck I. In a cowslip's bell I lie. There I couch when owls do cry. On the bat's back I do fly after summer. Merrily, merrily, merrily shall I live now. Under the blossom that hangs from the bough.
Why, that's my dainty Ariel. I shall miss thee. So? To the kingship, invisible as thou art, the master and the bosun being awake, enforce them to this place, and presently, I pray thee.
Well, that was pretty awesome, man. Of course, I saw it before.
Right.
Obviously it's Christopher Plummer, and the other act. I mean, she's great.
So that is Juliana Solestio playing Ariel, and she is great.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her in quite a while. I haven't seen Chris in quite a while either. But and that's directed by Des McAnuff. Just to say, and those are all musicians from Stratford playing, and that is her singing. Yeah. I'm very fond of it. I think it's really pretty good. I got no complaints about it. So
The about how long ago did you do this project?
this was 2010, 11-ish.
Okay.
I think 2010 was a production, and then it was filmed. Right, and then it was filmed for Canadian Bravo, which is a really nice thing. And it was filmed over 2 performances, and then a bunch of close-ups were shot as well. So yeah, it's about 2010, so 10 years ago now. Just to because I imagine you'd want to know this. The way that music happens, in most cases, certainly working with Des, I was hired to be in rehearsals almost all the time, and I would sit in a corner with a few keyboards, a few drums, a Pro Tools setup, and I would improvise all the time. I was told that Chris Plummer was not going to enjoy being underscored. But The Tempest calls for it. He calls for that music, right? And there are songs. So I knew I had a little bit of an in. But I'll tell you, it's just interesting. He got to the point where he would sit next to me and really trusted me. Because he would see that I was working it out with him.
Right.
And I was watching him very carefully.
Right.
And so he would get to the point where Michael maybe do that note here, and I would, He also, Chris went, I think I have this right, Chris went to high school with Oscar Peterson. And in another would have loved to have been a great jazz pianist, but I think Oscar Peterson had it over him.
Maybe he's pretty good.
Yeah,
he's pretty good. Yeah.
So he decided to become an actor, and he's awfully good.
Right.
And I think, the I've had the experience of working with him and working with Tom Hanks in Shakespeare, and bring your A game.
Yeah.
'cause they do.
Yeah.
And don't be late, be on time and know what your job is,
Mm-hmm.
and make it clear you're there to collaborate.
Right.
And he was great about that. And then what's interesting about the song, if you look at the lyric, it's strophic but kind of uneven.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also on the bat, where the bee sucks, there suck I. In a cowslip's bell I lie. There I couch when owls do cry. So far so good. On the bat's back I do fly. After summer merrily. What do you do with that one, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
How do you
we're moving along,
that?
everything's cool.
Yeah.
Then what happened? And then after summer merrily, merrily, merrily shall I live now under the blossom that hangs on the bough. And so there's a little bit of rhythmic weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
And she's saying, I'm going to be free.
Yeah.
You're going to free me.
Yeah.
It's a very important statement from her, because in fact at the end, now again, we there's a lot to talk about with slavery and is Prospero a nice guy?
Right.
He's rather arrogant.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like all Shakespeare characters, they're not black and white. They're very complicated.
Absolutely.
And Chrysis Prospero was aware of his arrogance and would say, "Wait a minute, you're right. I'm doing what my enemies did.
Right.
I need to be bigger than
right.
that." And he would learn that from Ariel.
Yeah. Right. I think that's one of the reasons why we keep, I think, go back to Shakespeare, not only because of the fluidity of the writing and the depth of plot and character and all this sort of thing, but the fact that the characters are in fact multidimensional. They're very human, and so it's very relatable to anybody who's lived a life of any kind. Can see themselves or others in the characters, and I find it interesting, and this might be a kind of interesting dovetail, if you will, to the web opera, which I think we should talk about maybe next. Is like in today's world, and I mean 2020 world, I think social media does this. Maybe this was set up by the 24-hour news cycle of cable news back in the 80s, and the instant demand of FedEx and all this other stuff. We want things to be black and white, and it's not. And so I find there's a kind of impatience when things are not clear. And I don't know if it's not necessarily generational, but it
might evolve that way.
It might evolve.
The more we hang out.
This is part of it, in a sense. Like, how do we? You mentioned like Prospero is maybe not a nice guy per se, right? But is a very complicated character at the same time, and so are many characters who are in our history of real life. Doesn't matter what your culture is, doesn't matter what your history is, where you come from. There are characters that we revere who have very dark spots. Lincoln, for example, was not a perfect character. We vault Lincoln into this sort of gold standard, but that's not the case. When people today, I think, if you think of sports icons who are not perfect, somebody like a Kobe Bryant, for example, right, who is clearly a flawed human being, but of course was a loving father and clearly adored his daughters and all this. In other words, like this is not an A and B situation, and yet our society wants an answer today. We want an answer like in 5 minutes for like, what's the solution?
Right. No, I think what you're kind of getting at, and I don't disagree, and in some ways the web opera deals with this, but to sound a little bit pretentious, is it possible to be a little pretentious? I don't know.
A skosh. We'll call it a skosh. How that pretentious word.
The 24-hour news cycle of social media, the immediacy of everything has, to my mind, one of the principal things that it's damaged is discourse.
Oh, yeah.
And discourse involves, cognitive thought about things and consideration.
Right.
Because the world is complicated. Life is complicated.
Right.
And nobody is, a purely good and purely evil. What the dramatists have showed us, what philosophers have showed us, is how complicated we really are. And how complicated every breath we take is, and every thought we have is. They're complicated. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting for artists is that we, in many ways, embrace the ambiguity of it. We really live in that place.
Sure.
In Godot, in Beckett, you're seeing, Godot was written essentially during World War II. Beckett and his girlfriend wandered around the farmlands of France, exiled from the city, and friends were dying, and they basically wandered around for a few years. And so what did they do after a while? They just told each other jokes. I'm oversimplifying, but that's what you do.
Right.
And that's what. So Godot is, in my mind, a very realistic play. At a certain point, if it's just you two there, what are you going to do? Well, tell me that same thing you told me yesterday. Why? Because it'll pass the time, right? And I think that's right. That the immediacy also, like, if you disagree with me, then you are my enemy.
Right.
Can easily captivate our thinking.
Right.
And it's difficult.
Difficult. And not to, I understand, when people in today's day, when people sort of like get very passionate about something and they want, but I think the like you said, the discourse is missing, and like, if you're going to take on a complicated subject, and I do want to let's connect this to social media, but the discourse is sadly lacking, to the extent where, like you said, it's like, if you don't agree with me, then you're against me. Sort of idea. And this is true. It's funny because the people who say that are the same people who do it. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm for, everybody. I like to say that everybody loves free speech until someone says something they don't agree with. Right. And then suddenly they're all against free speech. And so when we have like political debates that, please explain everything that there is to say about a very complicated topic, and you have 90 seconds to basically tell us what you're going to do about it. Right. It's which is insane. Well, I mean, no, we need 90 hours. Let's have a whole week long. Every night at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 10 o'clock, we have a discussion about that one topic. And the next week, we have the discussion about the next topic. And then really actually get into substantive dialogue. Right. That doesn't happen.
Right. And America is very good at making very quick judgments pushed out into the universe, and judging people quicker than any of us should be judged. So what's interesting, I don't know if I put that well, but what's interesting about Shakespeare's point of view of characters is, in somebody like Prospero, is that he is capable of learning that his arrogance, it's all the Greek plays are like this too. It's finally your arrogance that brings you down, and if you don't understand how that can take over, you hubris, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of us go there.
We all do. We all have
of us
those
do.
moments, right? Right.
And in America, which is a free for all, and in America, I mean, we haven't talked about my work with Randy Newman yet, but as Randy in his great song, "The World Isn't Fair," his song about Karl Marx and PTA meetings, and
yeah, right.
And the final quatrain of the song. I hope this is out of context, but I hope it's okay. I'm glad I'm living in the land of the free, where the rich just get richer and the poor you don't ever have to see.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't mean that.
No.
But America kind of embraces that.
Right.
And we see that every day. And it's terrifying.
It is.
How much that's there, and in the current scene, how that has exploded in a giant cloud over our head.
Right.
It's quite something.
Right.
And will we recover, and how? Probably, but I don't know how. And or are we going to keep talking like this, Elliot? You and me.
I don't know.
Boxes,
it's fine. We can have a whole episode just on this. But let's talk about the web opera.
Okay, let's talk about
since
the web
it's somewhat related to the to what we're to the kind of onslaught of all of this new stuff. It's about these devices here to some degree.
I've never seen. What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a camera. This is what it is. It's a really expensive Samsung camera.
Right. Why don't I kind of I'll say a couple of things about it. We're going to watch episode 3, so I'll say just a handful of things about it. First of all, lest you think that I'm some really, really successful musical theater composer who's done a bunch of musicals and they've all run forever, I'm in fact not that person. And I have for about the past 10 years or so, maybe longer, said to any writer who wanted to write a musical or an opera or anything, I've essentially said, sure, great. It might not ever get produced.
Right.
It might have a workshop, it might have a reading with a piano, and that might be it. But we can make a film. And, and eventually circumstances led to a poet, librettist, Kate Gale, and I putting this thing together based on a true story. But just what I would say is that, yes, I'm the producer, which I hadn't put that word next to my name until the director, Kate Jobson, said, you're the producer. And I said, well, okay. It was recorded within about 2 feet of here. The rehearsals were about 4 feet over there that way. And all the episodes were shot within 10 feet of where I'm sitting right now. I did pay everybody for their work. I did apply for some grants. I got one from Santa Monica, not for very much, and I was turned down by about 10 or 15. But I just knew I had to do this and produce it myself, and that's still how I feel about it. So, because we're in episode 1, you meet a young man who we call FG97. Everybody's referred to by their email address.
Okay.
Okay, so he is FG97 at Gmail, basically. And you become very aware that the camera is always from inside the computer or inside an iPad or inside an iPhone. The shots are only computer shots. So in other words, you are in fact violating the privacy of the characters that you're watching. Anyway, in episode 1, you see a young man, a student in college, who is downloading some new software for a new webcam and is enjoying it, and clearly has a good time knowing about webcams. He gets a message, an email from the fellow who's going to be his roommate saying he's going to be late. The roommate is violinist 98. He gets a little miffed about it, but says okay, and then starts Googling his roommate and discovers things about him. that he starts sharing with a woman across the hall whose name is June. And then at the end, he leaves to meet June to do some more Googling of Violinist 98.
Okay.
And you see a shot from the webcam of a bed next to a door. Okay, episode 2, each episode's about 10 minutes, 10, 11 minutes long. Episode 2, you see a young man practicing violin. He is Violinist 98 at Yahoo. And like all musicians who are trying to practice, sometimes it doesn't go that well and you're very distracted. And it's just not going all that well. And he goes online and he's trying to find somebody in a forum to talk to, but he can't find anybody. And he's feeling pretty lonely and kind of lost in his thoughts a bit. And then his elegiac thoughts are interrupted by a friend request. And nothing turns you on more than a friend request. And it's from a fellow he met the day before, whose name is Bookstore 90. And he remembers him, and they start, writing to each other. And he's very excited, and they set up a date. So these two guys set up a date for the next night. And then at the end of the episode, Violinist 98 texts his roommate, who we'd met, right, saying, "I need the room tomorrow for a private meeting." And then you see a text coming back saying, "No problem." And now you'll see episode 3, in which you'll see June doing a homework assignment. You'll see the second person who comes in is FG97 from episode 1, and things happen, and I think that's all.
Yeah, you give it away. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay, great. Let's cue this up, and I'm gonna switch views. Try to control myself here, and we'll see you when the scene is over.
To freedom of religion is unbreakable. All faiths are welcome, no mistake. It's the promise we make and essential to who we are. Question 1. Another president wished to make it so in the very same spot several centuries ago. Name that president. Okay, in the same city, discuss his philosophy, and the name would be America, striving for utopian fulfillment, freedom of religion, a city on a hill. That history was often awkward and frequently it's open frequently.
Hey,
Finishing something
okay, what are you?
embarrassing, poli-sci and religion. So violin boy's got a date.
Yeah,
What's he like? Washington spoke eloquent. So?
I don't know.
Spoke eloquently about what?
He's
He's
kinda
But
Creepy?
creepy, really?
Well, I think he works at the bookstore, so he knocked on the door, mumbling about who knows. And like he was gonna be fed, he sat down on the bed
And
and said nothing. He just stroked his beard and he looked at the window and the blinds. It was weird, and I didn't want to leave my stuff. I have thousands of dollars of legitimate. I worked hard putting together all that computer shit. I don't know
places of worship are no
if it's
different.
stolen.
Yeah.
Well, someone's gotta pay. I mean,
Not violin boy.
yeah, well, no, but
But what does he look like?
hard to say. But hey, you're on my iChat.
I think so.
Right, maybe I could
Okay, let me finish this one.
log on to my iChat. I leave the webcam on and there is no restriction on which clients can connect to this broadcast. You can restrict access by IP address, and as the screen suggests, our broadcast will be available to anyone. Right, I leave the webcam on and the monitor off, and it looks like everything's off. So for now, go ahead and click OK and bookstore. Okay. I can't see their faces to worry so.
Actually seen. We shouldn't. I feel kinda creepy.
Uncomfortable
Just looking is guilty wrong.
And we didn't look very long,
So
let's not look anymore.
Never
happened.
nothing happened.
Well, something happened,
But
let's not look anymore. He's not
never
from
saw that
our
before,
world.
and
He's
I
a
should
random.
get busy doing
Yeah, you
something.
should.
Oh hey,
Oh hey,
The others will be here soon.
okay.
okay.
Hey, you're from across the hall. What's going on?
His roommate kicked him out. Got a
Got a
date.
date.
Violin boy. Good for him. What are you looking at? There,
Not looking anymore. It's my roommate.
It's his webcam.
What are you watching? Cause we got shit to talk about. I know.
What are you looking at now? Roommate looking at his roommate.
Oh my god,
Kinda
my
creepy.
fucking god.
She just make confessions.
You were looking, what then you stopped? Why don't we log on
We
again?
can, but there wasn't much to see.
Much to see.
Much you saw him on the webcam with his boyfriend on the webcam, and you turned it off just now. Wow.
I'd like to see more.
Take any pictures.
No, that would be shitty. It was weird, and that old guy with his beard. Is there any food
Here we got shit to talk about and what to do, but maybe I should stay.
Really?
I should go.
Maybe you don't have to.
I got work to do.
What's
And besides, I want to have a look.
I'm working. A friend from across the hall is here. His webcam.
Can't come back with her.
His
There are the
roommate. With his boyfriend.
Just
No
gonna
shit.
chat.
No. Washington was making sure his vision for the future was clear. A vision like Shakespeare, cut and paste. Vision from Shakespeare. Had I plantation of this isle, and were the king, what would I do? No kind of traffic would I admit, no occupation.
Well, man, well, there's a lot to unpack
Yeah, I suppose.
in that, but I'm gonna switch my thing so I can see if we get comments from the audience and some questions. But it's interesting I've seen this a couple of times, and it's really each time it's very impactful, and it's impactful in different ways. First of all, I don't want to not talk about the music that's there. You as a composer, right? And the your choices and all that kind of stuff, right?
And I'm having coffee, so. Yeah,
and you're yeah. By the way, composers at home may be drinking coffee, available, and at eBay near you. But anyway. So the power of the message and the power of the dramatic content is obviously palpable. It would be palpable music if the music was there or not. It would still be a palpable thing. The music, of course, adds that layer, and I'm besides the topical nature of the opera and the all of the things relating to the things like the technology and the invasiveness, the privacy, the and my relationship to it. And it's interesting that you and I are of older generation than the generation depicted here in the web opera. It's interesting that you're writing something that is so inside of what, say, the younger millennials and I guess it was the zillennials, whatever, I forget what they're like. There's a lot of different terms for those who are sort of don't know 9/11, basically. So that you're writing with your work in this is so it's so not removed in a way, right? Because right, so I mean, obviously the power of the libretto and the power of the story plays a big role in this. But anyway, first of all, how did you, when you first started conceiving, being a part of this project and doing this, how did you go about thinking about it from a musical point of view when reading the libretto and sort of working collaboratively and all this stuff? Like what were some of your thoughts?
There's a couple of answers to that. First of all, the libretto was a constantly evolving thing. Mm-hmm. Kate and I discussed a number of ideas, but I kept saying, film is interesting too, and the preamble to the answer is why film? Because we could make it, as opposed to not ever making it, and musically I could do whatever I wanted.
Right.
There's about 8 prepared piano sounds in there, right? And as you and I talked about, it's not like I wrote out all the notes for all the prepared pianos. That was a lot of mixing and stuff that I would do. Yeah. And so, I wrote the score and then kept evolving it, and likewise the libretto. Because I think the other thing is, because it was going to be a film, in film, something has to happen all the time. Mm-hmm. There's very little that you can do in film where somebody can sit there and just be in a cliche operatic sense, alone and think about your thoughts. That's very hard to do in film. This had to have action, and when I learned about what happened to Tyler Clementi, and clearly our story is inspired by his tragedy. I don't remember the exact order of events for me, but at a certain point I realized this is a crime unique to our. This could not have happened when you and I were in Michigan.
Oh, absolutely not. And you
know.
and I weren't at Michigan at the same time.
Right, I know.
So it's funny that our experiences. So I just to frame that, I think it's fascinating. Your experience at Michigan as a college student, and my experience at Michigan as a college student, were probably not very dissimilar, despite the fact that they were separated by a number of years.
Yeah,
but
about 10 years or so. Right?
But you take that and you telescope that to today, and the experience is light years different. Right.
And because as I put it in rehearsal, sometimes I'd said, posting something, posting a thought, which you and I and all of our friends can do 1,000 times a day.
Right.
However, I met Elliot. He seems like a nice guy.
Right.
Or I met Elliot and I'm not so sure about him.
What an idiot.
Or I met Elliot and he was eating some food that looked really good. Who cares? Why am I posting that?
Right.
Is that anybody's business?
Right.
The need to share information that is trivial is very weird and part of our time. And again, I'm on Facebook. I mean, you can find me. I'll take your friendship. I'm not.
Yeah, right. It's free, by the way. It's free.
It's free.
Yeah, my friendship is free.
And I'll be your friend. Right. It's all cool. But so when I read about what happened, in other words, somebody, a roommate sent out a tweet, and the other roommate, Tyler, read it that night, and this eventually led to his suicide. Yeah. I said, what's interesting about it to me, among a million other things, so because I don't want to get too stuck in this, because there's a lot there, is, first of all, what crime was committed? And now we have what he was eventually convicted of was bias intervention. Now there's more to the story, and that will be episodes 4 and 5. So I won't go into too many details about that. But the fact that all of this action happened in a frame that I am looking at right now, it all happened here.
Yeah.
So the idea of telling a story about violating somebody's privacy, doing things that are not hard to do, and the audience basically being complicit by violating the character's privacy, very much appealed to me as we kind of kept evolving. And then, so the libretto sort of evolved like that. Now, I quote The Tempest in here. So yes, we played music from The Tempest, and The Tempest is in here. And in fact, but what's interesting, given the talk we had about Shakespeare's great depiction of how complex we are, is that in The Tempest, Gonzalo, one of Prospero's captors, before he knows that Prospero's there, but he's on the island, and they're on this island, and he basically comes up with a utopian vision of what this world could be.
Yeah.
And when you read about America as the shining city on the hill, and you see the utopian vision of what we have created as Americans, so to speak.
Yeah.
And how, and she's writing a paper about that, and she's cutting and pasting from The Tempest to make her point. What's interesting, and this is I hope the most succinct way to put things, is that the internet and the way we communicate flattens everything out. So you could be quoting Shakespeare, ordering Korean barbecue, texting to your boyfriend, and writing a tweet that nobody knows you're writing. He's writing something, and is he sharing it with anybody? No.
Right.
Does he know who's going to see it? No.
Yeah.
You post things not knowing who's going to read it, right? That's part of what we do. We don't know what's going to happen. And he didn't really know what was going to happen. All those events become equal in a certain sort of way. They're just the same thing in a weird plane of reality. Food gets ordered, text your boyfriend, go to play Frisbee golf, and my boyfriend, my roommate was making out with a dude.
Right.
Yay! That is actually part of the tweet. Yay is so weird.
Right.
And he wrote that. Now, and this is I promise the last thing I'll say about that is I'll contend that when he was writing that tweet, it's not like he said, "I know this will be really mean. This will be great. I'll do."
Yes,
I think
there was no.
I think you're disconnected from it because you can say, yes, I like you. You like things in Facebook. Do you give it a lot of thought? No. Do you put much discourse into it? No.
Right.
Just like stuff. And I like that picture of that London Royal at that deli there. That looks good too. And it's all
Part of the same.
It's a
yeah.
very weird reality.
Yeah.
And that's among other things, including homophobia and the innate cruelty of people and the ultimate tragedy here. That's a part of what I was writing about.
Yeah. Well, it's very powerful stuff. And like you said, from a musical point of view, the fact that you could more or less do anything you wanted,
Right.
sound wise.
Right.
Like you could have 6 prepared pianos, right, or whatever.
Or
Was it
for
6?
example, because it's my favorite thing, I love women backup singers. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make my life really good, just have women repeating everything I say and singing in
Just sort of like
6
call and
to 8
response,
bars.
right?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
just repeating everything I say.
Yeah, right.
With really cool harmony.
Right,
It's
right.
I love it, and you can tell that there are women there's women backup all the time in it, in a subliminal way, in a strange way, and sometimes in a literal
Yeah.
way. That would be very hard to do live.
Yeah.
You know,
And
yeah.
I was thinking about, actually, as the scene was playing out, I was sort of thinking how one could adapt this to a live performance. It'd be difficult, but it wouldn't be impossible, actually, ironically, because of technology, because you could throw those, you could have screens where you're projecting the foreground material and things like this, right? It's all possible,
But the real question would be, like, as you and I talked about this, is there's a gunshot, so to speak, in this episode.
Yeah.
So a fellow sends out a tweet.
Right,
And
right.
in traditional opera, that would be sung, probably, by the fellow sending it.
right. But this
But in
isn't sung.
fact,
It's just
It's silent.
it's a
And
silent.
what I do is put a lot of sound around it, and then can I just want to give a shout out to some people?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, man.
Yeah. So first of all, the actors, who are
course.
awfully good.
Yeah.
So that's Stephanie Cecile Yavalo as June,
Yeah.
and Ruben Uy as FG97, Molly Connor as the first roommate who comes in, who her blonde hair kind of emits light, which is kind of amazing and really helps the film. I think it's one of those things. Lauren Batley and Joyce Lay are the two roommates' friends. Lauren's a backup singer for Michael Bublé, which I think is fantastic.
Wow.
And then Adam Van Almen, who is, please watch episode 1 and 2 of the web opera, and to watch Ruben's work and Adam's work. Adam's work in episode 2, which is a monologue, is astonishing. And this is a very, very talented guy. Anyway, you see him at the end, sitting on the bed and reading the tweet, which is
reading.
essentially what happened. I'll just want to mention musicians: Peter Sprague and Duncan Moore, Botcha McAdam Summer, and Missy Lukin, and Steve Ardoti is playing cello. And then the backup singers are Emily Kozlowski and Laura Val, as well as Jackie Lopez and Amy White. And then my dearest friend, Kate Jobson, the director, who did a spectacular job. And finally, the Dana Feidelson is the DP, whose persistence with this project was great. And then finally, the kind of unsung hero, in a way, is Chris Gall, who did all the graphics. Because those graphics are
really
astonishing.
great. I was going to comment on that,
Because he makes that climax happen. He puts a tweet there for you. And as I say, so could you do this on stage? I imagine, but it would be hard, and I don't know.
Right.
This is the real question. if somebody said, yes, let's do it on stage, it'll be great. And
Mhm.
here's a lot of money, because it would be a lot of money.
Yeah.
And how much of it would be pre-recorded, how much of it would be live music, I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Good question. Because there's a couple of layers of electric guitar.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sound effects, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Steve Cahill did the great sound mix too, I should
Yeah.
mention him.
Yeah.
How do you make that moment happen? Because basically that tweet takes over the screen and then explodes out
Right.
and dissipates into nothing. I don't know. It's a good
Well,
question.
yeah.
Not impossible. Even Chris has said you should do it on stage someday. Of course, when will anything be on stage again?
Well, I don't know. It's,
I
you
don't know,
you managed to write the perfect opera for our time.
Thank you, Elliot. I'm going to quote you on that
You
one.
can play it.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. We do have some questions, or a question. So Andrew D'Angelo, my composer friend, is really fantastic. So I think he was asking some questions from before, but also he asked a question, I think, relative to the web opera. So we'll start with the question from the web opera, which is, how much direction was given to the players on screen?
Quite a bit. One thing to notice, perhaps if it becomes a little bit more noticeable when you watch it a second time, is the center of each episode is a 10-minute take. There's no cuts. Our rule was we're not going to make any cuts until we switch to a different device.
Okay.
So so it's really all straight until we switch to the roommate's iPad.
Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
And each episode is like that. There's a center long take from a computer point of view.
Yeah.
The way we rehearsed it was actually, I suppose, sort of interesting. Again, the rule in showbiz, to my mind, is you can do it fast, cheap. You can have fast, cheap, and good. You can only have two of those three.
Right. Right.
Because I was essentially paying for it, and everybody had complicated schedules, to rehearse episode 3, that took about 5 months. We had a few musical rehearsals. By the way, Stephanie, if she's listening, she's in Amsterdam right now. Stephanie's the best sight reader I've ever worked with. So
Yeah.
I'll just say she sight read that opening when she sang for me and auditioned, and I mean, it's metrical. It does all kinds of nonsense. And
Right.
she was just
doing it. Yeah.
It's pretty great. Anyway, but all of them sort of got the music into their system. The rehearsals were me playing it in Pro Tools, a little bit on piano, but it's not piano. There's
Right.
no piano vocal
Right.
of it.
Right.
That's the other thing, that I tend not to write piano vocals. I tend to write score, and so I would just be filling out the score as I kept composing.
Yeah.
Anyway, then I think what happened, that because it took time, and then there'd be weeks where nothing would happen, was the behavior became lived in. And it's one of the things that the actor said, is that they're actually not doing a whole lot of big acting stuff. It's very, to use a phrase, quotidian behavior. It's normal. Nobody's doing anything astonishing.
Right.
They're just going about their lives, as
Right.
Roth would say.
Right.
And that takes a while, because you kind of want to weed any sense of you want to perform this away and just make it behavioral, which is film-like and all that. So, and they would sing along. Their vocals are pre-recorded, but they sing along with them live. I mean, all the time. And just to say this about vocal quality, Stephanie certainly can sing operatically if you wanted to. Likewise, Adam can. But I think the feeling was that wasn't really quite right for how intimate the camera makes it.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I hope that answers
Yeah.
his question. I hope so.
Yeah, as Andrew said, they all did a fantastic job, which is, yes, they did, absolutely.
Yes, they did.
Andrew also says, he said, wait, Steve Cahill from Seattle?
Steve Cahill, Steve Cahill lives in L.A. He's a he's a good composer and a good sound designer. I doubt he's listening, but I'll ask him if he's from. I don't know of a Seattle connection, but it's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
I only
don't-
know him in LA.
maybe,
Sorry.
So, yeah. So Andrew also said, I loved when the girl would scratch her face. It felt very natural,
Yeah.
which is why he asked the question. I suppose, yeah.
That was directed. I remember Kate saying because her writing this little term paper, which is what is she doing in that episode? She's writing a term paper, and it's not going very well.
Yeah.
You know, and she's just trying to write something and
Just get
it's
it done.
homework and,
Yeah, get it
you
done.
know,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And it's making her tired, which is why she finally says, "I know Shakespeare. Let's quote Shakespeare."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, so Andrew said, yes, he lives in LA, but we grew up together in Seattle.
Well, there
You have it.
you track me down, and I will get the two of you together. I haven't seen Stephen in a while, but yes, there you go.
That's awesome.
Glad I made a connection.
Yeah, Andrew's a good person for you to know too. He's a really fantastic player, composer, jazz performer, all kinds of styles, everything. So great. If anybody has any other questions or comments for Michael about anything that we're doing, please feel free to chime in. Say hello, even if you don't have a question, it'll be fine. So I keep looking this way to sort of see if there's more chatter. So yeah, it's a powerful statement for our time. Like you said, it's based on a true story, and it certainly demonstrates the power and the potency that our current technology provides.
Right, and I'll say, the connection from that to a president who tweets is there for me. That how we communicate and what we do. That's very much in there, and in my mind, obviously, when we were writing it, that Trump wasn't president. I mean, that happened in the middle of rehearsing episode 3, I believe, that the election happened. But and just to say this about it too, so the web opera has been an official selection at 20 film festivals so far. I knew
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I knew nothing about film festivals when this all began. I know something about them now, and we've been. There's a best music one that we won, a best humanitarian thing, which is nice. I'm just really glad that it's engendered some conversation about who we are and what we're doing, and then also some people have said, so this is a new way to create work and do work. I mean, and I hope it encourages people.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's the modality of how you chose to work, which is interesting, and also somewhat taking advantage of technology. Although film's been around for a long time, so that's not really an issue. But like you said, there are things you can do in film so that you can't do on stage, and there's probably an intimacy and a kind of the performative moment that you don't get in film that you would get in live sort of theater performance. So like they have pluses and minuses. But I think certainly today, doing an opera or a musical that's entirely sort of based in the film media is not a bad way to go for a composer or a composer librettist team to do something. And then you have some advantages, visual advantages, maybe sound design advantages and things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it isn't like you're writing music for a movie. That's a whole different beast altogether. So there's that. And also, I think the second thing is that because of the subject matter, I think the subject matter also lends itself very well. It's called the web opera, and where else better to experience than on the internet.
Right.
Right.
No,
as through your iPad, or whatever, through your computer, which is kind of where all the, like you said, all the views are based on technology. And
I'll just throw another couple of thoughts your way. First of all, this is in fact Suicide Prevention Week this week. And if you go to our website, so thewebopera.com, we created the piece in some ways, consulting with a fellow named Eduardo Vega, who is works in suicide prevention, and so you'll find a resource page on our website that's actually had a fair amount of activity of people, who have experienced cyberbullying and cyber and the various worlds that creates. The premiere screening of the web opera so we had a launch party in January, and a launch event, I should say, I guess, and we had a little panel discussion with 3 young people, all of whom had attempted suicide, and all of whom, I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this right, or at least 2 of them, I think, had quit all social media. And what they said was that watching the whole opera, because we showed all 3 episodes, to watch all 3 is about 40 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not the Ring cycle. It's there are triggers that show. Yeah. And if and all of us are in this world, if your own level of happiness or unhappiness or being content with something is on a certain level defined by whether you get a like or not.
Yeah.
That's a very strange thing.
And like you said, it's a new thing, or as in maybe 10, 15 years, but you know what I'm talking about, relatively new.
But it's new in its pandemic quality. It spreads out, and I've literally seen people say, why has nobody commented about this? Well, it could be because they didn't see it, and it could be because they didn't feel like commenting, which is more often
than not. And I'll say, like say on Facebook, and I mean, this is a topic that you and I could probably talk for another 2 hours on, 3 hours over wine or whatever. The whole notion of things like social media and the human interaction changes and the pluses and minuses there, and of course things that happen like you depict in the web opera, which are very real things and happening all the time, and when we're not even aware of it, that these kinds of things are happening in more or less, in greater or lesser degrees. But it's a new world, and like personally I've gone through kind of a bell curve on social media. The bell curve was like, ooh, wow, this is stupid, like who cares about this? And then for a while it was like, of course I'm going to post a picture of what I'm eating for breakfast. And then I'm like, who gives a shit about what I'm eating for breakfast? Right. I don't even give a shit about what I'm eating for breakfast. I mean, it's like it's a bell curve, and it's like I probably peaked with social media in about 2015 or so, or 16, and then I was just like, you know what? It's like I post things that probably make people laugh or relative to the career. And so like my advice to a lot of young composers, speaking of sort of from our career point of view, is that if you're a composer or an artist, you're a public person. So the first thing you have to do is get over the fact that if you want to do this for a career, you really aren't a private person. So that's number one. Number two, because of that, sure, go ahead and post what you ate for breakfast, but understand that is also information that's going to go alongside of the new piece that you just finished that you want to promote. Right. So it's like separate the two, like have a place for just, professional stuff. And then if you just have silly stuff for your former college roommates or high school buddies or, that sort of thing, that's fine. Whatever. It's just a way to keep in touch with friends, basically. But like you said, we all crave human connection on some level. Even those who are the most misanthropic do privately. And so, yes, Andrew, I'm on social media. Yes, right. Give me a like. I need it. No,
But
the point is that we're all what social media allows us to do, and the funny thing is I'm doing it right now. Right. Is it allows us to be the host of our own show. It's like, it's the Elliot McKinley show starring Elliot McKinley, or the Michael Roth show starring Michael Roth. And so we get to produce it, we get to direct it, we get to control the content, we get to do all of that stuff, and we get to put it out there the way we want it, which may or may not have any bearing on actually who we are, or what we really think. Right. And that's a really interesting kind of thing. It's like
And in other words, the way I sort of put it is that the world we're creating and in the middle of reinforces our own narcissism,
sure,
passive aggression,
sure,
and because I at one point I try, and I don't know if I'm successful, but I don't think I post anything critical or negative about anything. I don't.
Well, you're not doing it right.
Right. But the one time I did, and this is a long time ago. It was pre-Facebook.
Were you on MySpace?
It was actually a Randy Newman fan group, and there'd been this concert, and I thought somebody did a bad job, and I posted about it, and I said, and I think he did a bad job. And then he contacted me the next day. Now everything's fine. We had coffee. Everything's cool. But I got to say, of the millions things that I have forgotten, that is one that I've not forgotten. I think about that moment, and I say, why did I write that?
Yeah.
What was finally not really worth saying, not very interesting, and
sure.
I wrote it for me.
Sure.
I wrote it because I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that my opinion
matters.
Is really worth putting out there.
Right.
And no, it's not. Unless you want to tell me.
I mean,
unless somebody says, what did you think of this? And then I can tell you privately. Or, a student saying, what do you think about this? And your response is not going to be pithy. But this almost demands that you're kind of not very thoughtful.
Sure.
And your discourse on this medium is not very good because all you want is a like.
You want a reaction. You're the person in the room that farts and wants to get the people around you to laugh.
Right.
And
that's a bit graphic, but go ahead.
Well, okay, sure. Since there's no fart reaction on Facebook.
Yeah, that's right.
No, and actually, by the way. Michael does do other things. I want to play one more piece for you guys before we go. I want to play the piano piece, which I think will be a great way to do this. Go ahead. Sorry. No. I just want to sort of wrap this up. And again, it's a big topic, but to say that social media it's like anything. It's a tool, and how you choose to use the tool is really the important part. And you can use it for, like you said, you can use it for stupid things, like you just say some stupid thing, and does it really matter? Or you can consider what you put out there, and maybe say something that might touch somebody else, or might share something that might connect with somebody else. Somebody might be having a bad day, and suddenly you share a piece of music, like. Sometimes I'll share is this beautiful piece by Bach or something, and whatever. And it's just like, there are times when you can make a human connection through that network. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a tool that can be very powerful.
Right. Absolutely.
But it also can be equally powerful in a negative way. And I think the really important thing is to understand that. And I think it's sort of like a 16-year-old with a car doesn't understand how dangerous the car actually is until you've had a close call.
Right. No, and as we show, in the group scene, there's casual cruelty going on there. It is very easy to be cruel online. It doesn't take a lot of effort.
No.
But you need to think about that, and because the ramifications that lead to cyber abuse, that lead to
Right.
It's just fraught with circumstances that, again, look at the discourse of the political world we're in now. Look at how much of it is enabled and encouraged by the president, who tweets, "This is going to be an awfully big ship to turn around if we're going to turn it around," because it's fraught with so much baggage and also need by individuals to put yourself out there and say, "But I'm me."
Right. Dig me.
Yeah.
Which is
it's
perfect
something.
for composers, by the way, because, we're all about the dig me,
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, but just provide a slight bit of levity in there. That's
Right.
never changed. That's universal,
Sure.
right?
No, I mean, Aeschylus wrote about it 2,000 years ago,
Right.
and in The Persians, which is an amazing play, and Shakespeare wrote about it too. So
Yeah.
I just like saying this tiny little anecdotal thing about
Sure.
the composition of the web opera, which I think can take us to the piano piece.
Uh-huh.
So for those who were counting eighth notes, an awful lot of the episode 3 is in 7/8, including the main rock and roll guitar lick. It manages to move around rhythmically. The other thing tangential to that is the way I composed it. So it was all written in finale. So I'm a finale boy because I'm older than you.
It's okay, man. Nobody's
it's
perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Thank you very much. But and they gave me a T-shirt.
You should have wore the T-shirt. I was expecting you to wear the T-shirt.
I'm actually wearing a Michigan T-shirt.
Oh, good for you. All
I
right.
really am. Anyway, no, but the way I wrote it in finale was when I changed tempo, I would change tempo in the finale file, and then all that became MIDI information that went into Pro Tools and became the click track and everything else. So basically, every episode was built from finale to Pro Tools and MIDI, and then recording instruments on top of that. So it's real cellos and real violins and real guitars and real percussion. I mentioned this the other day, and this is one of those things that I know I never would have thought of. But Duncan Moore, who's a great jazz drummer, really, who plays with Peter Sprague, who's one of the best guitarists in the country. So I'm glad I have good friends.
Right?
Yeah. I asked Duncan to play along with the 7/8 on a hi-hat, accenting with the guitar. And it sounds cool, and it's all great, and it's all fine and notated. Thank you very much. And then when I was back home and listening to it for the first time, I just really liked having that timbre there. And I went back to episode 1, and I said, there's a section here that could really use a hi-hat. Just a hi-hat kind of comping along with it. But the only hi-hat I had was at a different tempo and in 7/8. So I said, okay, well, let's just take that. I can make the tempo the same. That I can do. We have the technology. But why don't we just keep it in 7/8, even though this thing's in 4/4? And I loved it. I mean, the accents were just off, just so slightly. But it managed to have just this life of its own. And as I say, I am not imaginative enough to have conceived it that way, notating it. You know what I mean? Like I would have said hi-hat and play along, whatever.
Something, right. Yeah.
But the fact, it's those sort of solutions in the mixing of it and the creation of it that were unique to the experience. That would also be very hard to play live, by the way, right? I mean, because I'd have to then notate it 7/8 and 4.
You could do it.
You could do it, but I'd have to stay up late, you know. So,
Who wants to do that?
and who wants to do that?
Yeah, right.
So there you go.
Oh, we do have I think we have a question. Maybe we have a question. I don't know. I thought we had another question. Do you want to talk about? Oh, Julie said. Julie Haber said, "Do you want to talk about your earlier opera? I play the CD every once in a while and really enjoy it."
What a sweet thing to say. What a lovely thing to say from Julie Haber. My goodness. Well, yes, I wrote the earlier opera. The one review said the music sounds like my music is what Charles Ives might have composed had he lived long enough to encounter beat poetry and rock and roll. And I gotta say, I'll embrace that one. And
You'll take that to the bank, right?
I'll take that one to the bank. It's a piece called "Their Thought and Back Again."
Uh-huh.
It is on my website. It's an opera. It was written in the late '90s. It was a choreographer named John Malashok, who still lives in San Diego, and with his company. And we talked about collaborating. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. The usually when dancers dance to lyrics, they either dance with the meaning of the lyrics or against the meaning of the lyrics, right? And I said, because I was reading a lot of William Burroughs at the time, I said, why don't we derive an entire libretto out of cut-ups, which is one of his literary techniques. Now, there's a lot of things I could say about that as a technique that I think is really interesting, but suffice it to say, that's what we did. So, so that means that the lyrics do make sense but the context of the lyrics and the subtext of the lyrics keep shifting because the lyrics are cut up. They're not nonsense. They actually make sense, but they have an odd poetry to them that's invented by the cut up. And it gets, as Burroughs would say, to a deeper level of where the language is going. So the hit song from the opera, for example, is called "Seeking a Woman to Bird Dream Car." And those lyrics were derived from cut-ups that from want ads in the San Diego Reader. And the piece, "Their Thought and Back Again," that is actually from a cut-up that's taken from Isaac Bashevis Singer and Henry Miller. And the piece is, speaking of Wonderful Town, it's the same exact plot as Wonderful Town. It's about two women who come to the city and have some adventures and stay there. And it ends with a big dance number. In this case, they come to this strange landscape where some dancers seem to live. And they stay there. I'm very proud of it. I really like it. It got a bit of play for a while, so I'm very glad Julie likes it. And who knows, maybe we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah. Well, I'm having everybody back for, where are they now? So, yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Jonathan Quisenberry, who, Jonathan, I'm really sorry I didn't see your messages earlier. I saw them over on Facebook, but I saw them over on YouTube. I got four windows open, and Jonathan asked. He asked a couple questions about the web opera, which we actually kind of covered mostly, but I'll put the questions out. Jonathan, I'm very sorry. Is improvising during rehearsal a typical process for a stage composer?
So that's more about the tempo.
Yeah.
It's not. It depends on the director and how you deal with the actors. With some directors, certainly with Des, it was usually budgeted that I would be there, and because he likes underscoring, he would like getting people sort of used to the idea. But I think the other thing is that as actors got used to it, they would see that I was working things out on the same way that they were working things out. So I would, and improvising sometimes meant, playing a couple of notes, and because I didn't know where I was going to go. So it became fairly usual for me under certain circumstances, certainly with the Shakespeare, that I would improvise or at least have some things going on because
Yeah.
and then the process was always then at a certain point I would have to take a few days off to actually really notate everything properly.
And-
I would
and-
be just notating things in the
Right.
script
Right.
and sort of seeing where it went, and so that
Mhm.
so did I improvise that music that underscored Plumber? Kinda. I kind of knew what I was doing, and then I would write
Mhm.
phrases out, but then at
Mhm.
night I would actually write it out and know it was going to be strings, so not really terribly pianistic,
Right.
that kind of
Right. The last thing
Jonathan's a very fine musician out here in LA who was going to assist me on Randy Newman's Faust. When will Randy Newman's Faust happen in LA? I don't know. I think it will. But when will we perform again? I don't know.
that's
There you go.
that's the $1 million
Thank you,
question.
Jonathan. That's fantastic.
He did ask one more question, which we and then I want to play Fast November.
Great.
How did you decide on the instrumentation for this? He means, I think, the web opera. And does it stay consistent throughout each episode? And we touched on some of that, but I guess maybe the consistency aspect.
So what I would do, the process was really, so you do actually have the score, and you can download the score from the website. And now the score is not the absolute final score, as I said, and I looked at it before I sent it to you. I said, there's some stuff that I added as I kind of brought the real instruments in, and kind of, it's a bit under mark. But that being said, I would write out a lot of percussion stuff, and then I would transfer all of it into separate MIDI tracks, and then I would start fleshing it out. Sometimes, so I have Contact, and I have UVI Workstation, and a few other things, and I would just say, well, what would be good? And sometimes I use the finale sound that was there too,
Right.
because you could put it aside the real thing, and then so it is pretty consistent between the 3 episodes. The opening sound of each episode, it's that. That is essentially the sound of my Mac starting. It's essentially that sound.
Right.
It's going, and it's a little out of tune, the real Mac sound, but it's actually there. But I knew that I would have Peter, and I knew that I would have Duncan, and I knew Steve Ardoti. So just to talk about the players I work with, Steven, who I think might be listening, is one of the best cellists in LA. If you've seen a movie in the past 20 years, you've heard him play. He's John Williams' principal cellist. And he's great. And he would sit right here, and I recorded the cello here. And then
Nice.
some stuff I recorded in Peter's studio.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's pretty consistent between the 3 episodes, give or take.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's play some more music before we let you go.
Okay.
In our remaining few minutes, and for the folks at home who are still watching, if you have any more comments or questions about anything, we'll field them. I do plan on putting links in the video descriptions, so if you want to check out, say, the whole web opera, the website, the site, and other music by Michael, I'll make those links available after we finish the show. So the piano piece, you want to set this up for the folks?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, because this is a piece that's never been performed per se. But, nowadays, the only person stopping me from writing is me. And if I don't write pieces like this, I only have myself to blame, because if I'm waiting for somebody to perform it, that puts me in a bind. And I know, unlike some composers, we've talked about this too, that the weird little niche that I'm kind of in as a guy who does theater and film and chamber, but it's all, it's a little bit some of my music's a little bit too weird for theater, and some of my music's a little bit, too rock and roll for chamber, etc., etc. If I don't write it, I don't work these muscles.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
realize now that Fats November, which is probably, it would certainly be a hard piece to play, but really where it came from was when I sit at a piano and just improvise, my Elliot Carter meets Fats Domino belief system takes over. I really am an old rock and roll pianist. That's really the only thing I know how to play. I am lucky that the one music direction thing I do now is for Randy Newman, which is another whole thing to discuss because he's been such a great mentor for me, and has influenced my piano playing style substantially. But I just love, I mean, I can just do that.
Right.
But then I also will go, and go someplace else.
Right.
So a pianist said, "Why don't you write a sonata?" And I said, "Okay." And I had a few months with no gigs because that happens in show business. And so I wrote a piece called Fats November, and this is the first 7 minutes of it. So this is finale playback with a little bit of nudging here and there. I don't know if anybody's ever going to play it. I don't know if it's impossible to play. Probably this playback's a little fast. But everything is a means to an end. If I didn't write Fats November and a few other pieces like that, I wouldn't have written the web opera as well.
It's like you said, it's exercising the compositional muscles,
right?
Whether or not it sees sort of whatever light it may see in some public way,
and it's about seeing the connection between complicated rhythms, odd counterpoints, some serial composition in there because that's certainly very much in me. At the same time that it hits the damn piano and plays the backbeat. They're all in there in an, I hope, uninhibited way. So that's what I'll say.
Okay, great. All right, I'll switch over to the music, and we'll meet you after we hear the.
And this video does have the score, so you'll be able to follow the score.
Awesome.
There you go.
Okay, we'll see you in a few minutes. Well, that was fun, man. Actually, I didn't listen to it. That was the first time. I mean, you sent me the file, but I didn't listen to it until just now. So that was that was my premiere to the ears.
Yeah. It's sort of my response to Boulez's second piano sonata, and I'm not really kidding. But
yeah,
but it is. It is in terms of intensity.
I was thinking that it's like I'm hearing for the first thought. I thought the first thing I thought of was that it's very American.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I don't want to say that it's like the kind of thing that only an American could write, because that's not really true, but it's the kind of thing that if you're steeped in the American experience, that this sort of thing could come out of you. I was hearing like it was like kind of Charles Ives meets Bartok meets James P. Johnson meets Pinetop Smith
meets Fats
Domino, who's of course in that lineage, by the way, of America, on the American side of things.
Totally.
And then Ligeti shows up. So I mean, it's kind of I mean, it's sort of, it's all out there, but the sense of rhythmic drive and the syncopation and the blues, the blues inflections and things like this. It's very American. So anyway, for what it's worth.
No, I appreciate that, and I have a sentence to say, and then a favor, because as you and I talked about, I go to a lot of concerts. I'm a new music guy. I think they all know me, and they're all friends of mine. But as I've said to you, the amount of time that I go to new music pieces and I don't hear a backbeat ever,
right,
is really weird, because I grew up with it. And that's not to say everything should have a backbeat.
Right.
And that's not to say let's clap on the 2 and the 4 all the time. Thank you very much.
Or the 1 and 3.
Right. That's not what it's about. But it is saying there are not an awful lot of what I hear kind of just stays in a kind of a float way and doesn't grab me.
Right.
And that's not to say that it's bad, but it is to say when I compose and I'm honest with myself, that I feel the beat a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just who I am, and all that. I have a favor to ask of you, because rather than, because I have a feeling she's listening, as a benediction to the evening, I would just love to play this last song. I'll say goodbye before it, because it's a great little message for the end of our revels, and it's only about 3 minutes long. So if it's cool, I'd love to just play it, because it's so different than everything else, and it's written on guitar and all things. So that is my favor to ask of you, because I think Fats Domino in some ways speaks for itself, and I think what you had to say
is pretty much there. If we have any questions from the audience in the meantime, we can do this. This is the song you sent me, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I have it queued up, so we can absolutely play that as our. And I'm not getting my.
This one,
glasses
if
clean.
you like, is this one. You can play the PDF.
Can play the PDF. Okay.
Yes,
I've got.
I'm going to put you to work.
I'm going to put me to page turning on the PDF.
Yeah, there you go.
So we'll use that as a kind of an outro. Yeah. Right. This is We'll change the format up a little bit. So we'll say our goodbyes and use this as an outro. And I'm not doing a very bad job of cleaning my glasses, but okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, I just use them for reading because I can't read these screens. But so again, we've probably 2 minutes. I'll play this last piece. In the meantime,
let me just say, just so everybody knows what they're listening to. This is from for all of my griping about how hard it is to do a new musical, this is in fact from a new musical. It was going to be workshopped at the Guthrie, where you have hung out in your town a
Yes,
bit,
yes.
back in the
Back
day.
in the day.
But everything got thrown around.
Yep.
It's from a music theater piece called The New Planet. It's written by my principal collaborator is a fantastic writer named Frances Yachukawig, who lives in Providence now. You're going to see her before I do. Isn't that amazing? And this is a song, and the director for the project is my friend Maya Garcia. Will this ever happen? Will anything ever happen? I don't know.
True, yeah,
In some ways, this play, which was written way before any pandemic hit us, is sort of reflects it. But that being said, this is a song called Mary's Lament, and it is sung by a frog named Mary, who is alone and realizes that she is, in fact, the last frog on Earth.
The last frog on Earth.
That's
the lament, of course, would make perfect sense in this.
I wrote on guitar, so it's me playing guitar.
It's you playing guitar. Okay.
And it's sung by Julie Benko, a really, really terrific singer-actress in New York. You've seen her in shows. You've seen her on Broadway. There you go.
Okay. So we're going to play that as the outro.
Yes.
And so as an outro, Michael, we will also bid you a good night. And anybody who has any additional, if you're watching later on the replay, if you have any questions or comments or whatever, leave them in a comment section. Michael and or I will get to them for you. I will also leave links and so on and so forth. But Michael, thank you so much for spending
fantastic, Elliot.
spending some time with me tonight.
Great. Thank you.
And we'll have you back on. Again, my production values are slowly going up, so maybe the next time I have you on, I'll actually I can load things up I said I was going to load up, like at the beginning of the night, and other things. Push the right buttons.
A green room with donuts would be nice, but I digress. So
it would be really lovely to have you sit next to me, and then we can have wine and donuts, or I don't. That doesn't really work, but okay, we'll have donuts and then we'll have wine, but whatever. So Michael, man, it was really great. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up. Some other time, yeah. So for the folks at home, I'm going to switch to my usual screen here, the me at the end, my solo shot. Please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like us on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So in the second season, I'm going to be doing 2 episodes a month roughly, and the next one comes up and I'm going to do the next episode. I've got the little screen here that's comes up, and it is Wang Jie, who will join us at the end of the month, and so I hope you tune in for that. I will be sending out the usual announcements on Facebook and YouTube, so stay tuned for that. Really looking forward to having her join us again, socially distanced. And I'm going to switch back to me here. For everybody else, and my YouTube, my subscribe button is still going on. I'll turn that off. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of the night, a wonderful rest of the weekend. Remember to socially distance responsibly in this time until we're out of the woods, and stay safe and happy. And I will see you at the end of September. Thank you very much.
When I was a tadpole, I wasn't alone. Hundreds of thousands called this fresh puddles, old rivers, deep lakes, giggling streams. We swam and we played when the water was clean. The water was clean. Frogs lived in trees, and frogs lived in sand. Frogs lived in swamps and on icy land. Freezing rock hard with the chill winter brings. Thawing again with the warming of spring. The warming of spring. Time is our friend when it moves sweet and slow. Gently advancing, we row with the flow. When things happen quick, it's much, much harder to change. So we become ghosts from a distant age. Farewell, ye young tadpole, you'll never grow old. You won't metamorphose or taste liquid gold. You won't be broken-hearted, depressed or forlorn, because, darling pollywog, you'll never be born. You'll never be born. Extinction, extinction, I've looked in your eye. You sir don't scare me. I know that we'll die. We lived while we could and sang through the long night. And now it is time to walk into the